How is the newsletter clip coming along? And good morning, Ben Goessling.
Good morning. It is. It's doing well. It's. We're 2 editions in now, and last week was a fun one. Obviously JJ McCarthy becomes the big top of it, but then it closes every week with kind of a lighthearted segment called the End Zone. So coming up with, we had like a montage of Vikings training camp photos from our archives the first week, and then I put together a trivia question last week on Sam Darnold and the kind of Johnny on the spot starters for the Vikings that he's trying to emulate.
Yeah.
So
what's the trivia question?
Well,
or do you need a picture to tie to it?
I have to go back to remember exactly all of the details to get it. You're good.
Yeah, we don't need it.
So there have been 19 quarterbacks. I can riff before I pull it up. 19 quarterbacks in Vikings history.
Oh, geez.
To start a playoff game.
Oh, wow.
Of those 19, 7 of them were veterans who had started for other teams before starting a playoff game for the Vikings in their first year with the team. In other words, picked up a starter.
Yeah.
Favre's one of them, yes.
How many are there?
7, and 3 of those 7 are one and dones. They didn't come back another year.
Oh. Wow.
The last one is
complex.
Fairly recent. Well, fairly recent in terms
Case
of play.
Keenum.
Case Keenum. Yep.
Yeah.
Jeff George?
Jeff George.
Oh, that's a good guess.
He's one of the one and dones.
Did Jim McMahon do one?
He is an answer to both of those, yes. Yeah. He's a one and done and one of the 7, yep.
Was Joe Kapp potentially? No.
Who are the others?
This is a lot of Denny era quarterbacks. Yeah. So
Randall Cunningham,
actually in 97. I had forgotten Randall Cunningham was here in 97.
Right.
He started in the playoffs in 97 after, starting a few games that year, but that was his first year, and then 98's the big one. Jeff George, Favre, Keenum, Jim McMahon, the Warren Moon, 94. The one that... Tarkenton is a no.
Wait, he was here, Giants, then here.
Well, sure, but he was here.
They didn't go to the playoffs.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yep. Okay. So the other one...
Rich Gannon?
Nobody's going to... This is a hard one. This is a really hard one. It's Sean Salisbury.
Oh, wow.
He started 4 games that year. They won the division.
That baby game was the bomb.
Yeah, he beat... They beat the Packers in week 17 or whatever it was, probably before a bye. Beat Favre is Favre's first year as a starter, and then started in the playoffs, I think, against Washington.
That Jeff George guess was terrific.
Yeah.
So Jeff George playoffs with Falcons? No,
Jeff George had been a starter elsewhere.
Oh, starter.
Year, yes.
Oh, I see.
First year with Vikings.
Yes.
Basically a quarterback they picked up off the scrap heap.
Yeah.
Kind of like Sam Darnold. Goes to the playoffs his first year in Minnesota. And in Jeff George's case, that was his only year in Minnesota.
99. Where were you in 99? College?
I was in high school.
Okay, you were in high school.
Yeah.
So do you, growing up watching Vikings games, do you remember Jeff George in 99 with this team?
Kind of. It was
unbelievable.
Yeah, he's throwing the ball all over the place.
Yeah.
And in fact, we were just talking about that among the beat writers yesterday, that Sam Darnold may have a little bit of that to him, just in terms of the big arm. And George was gunslinger.
McCarthy is of the gunslinging variety.
Yeah.
When he starts to play with conviction and, he's like, hey, this is really my job and nobody behind me is going to take it. Right. I'm just going to go out there and fire that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some of that to him, too. That season, yes, he was, because I think Cunningham... trying to remember if Cunningham was. I think he was still here.
Well, Randall. So you have 98.
Switched.
You got
George,
Brad
right?
Johnson.
Yep.
And it didn't work out, or he got hurt.
Yeah.
And then Randall Cunningham joins, and he becomes the National Football League most valuable player.
Right.
As part of the 98 Vikings, we know how it ended. So we head into the next season, and I'm not with the team. I'm not calling games for the team at that time. It was only my second year here, living full time in Minnesota, but it's still very vivid. Where Cunningham. From those who were on the team, as they recall it, have told me that you just can't explain what happened to Randall Cunningham.
From 98 to 99.
Yes. Yeah. He all of a sudden had deer in the headlights terrorism, was second-guessing everything, running at the wrong time, dropping it, stuff like that. So they have a game. Season's not going well, and the expectations obviously are high.
Right.
And they're at Silverdome. Okay, so they're playing the Motor City Kitties at Silverdome in Pontiac. And Denny pulls him. I think it was halftime.
Yeah.
And the second half, everything changed. Jeff George came in, and he's playing with reckless abandon.
Yeah.
And I think they lost a very close one, maybe by 2.
Yeah.
But like Mo Williams is blocking punts. Everybody went from 90% to the metaphorical or proverbial 110%.
So the energy came back.
Right.
Yep.
And then it stayed.
Yep.
And I mean, Jeff George, he being a scribe, and like those Jeff George press conferences weekly, or just talking to him on the side. I mean, he could be a raconteur, but he also was an elite one-liner.
Yeah.
So like somebody asked him, Jerry Glanville or whatever had this to say, or when you were in Atlanta, and he's like, we used to have the clip, maybe we still do. He said, life's full of slappies. And like slappy became a KFAN term that we used forever.
Yes.
Life's full of slappies. And that was it. And he was, so we were doing, myself and Irv Cross.
Okay.
NFL Today, Irv Cross. He was the AD at McAllister at the time. And we were doing Vikings Uncensored at Joe's Censors in Bloomington. Which used to be the Rusty Scupper or something like that, right off 494.
Yeah, I know where it is. I remember it as Joe Censors mostly, but yeah.
So that was Monday nights. And Jeff George came by one time. And, he stole the show, and the crowd was packed, and he enjoyed himself.
Yeah.
So then I or somebody got with him the next week and said, well, what's it going to take to get you to come to Vikings Uncensored every so often? And he said, I'll come every week if you guys can provide a limousine from my house to Censors to Bunkers for Dr. Mambo's combo on Monday night.
And music.
and like 24 beers.
Wow.
In the limousine for me and this group that would travel with him. Oh, he came every week.
Okay.
And there was a limo every week, or some kind of bus or something like that. So he was terrific. But that whole energy trip, like the Josh Dobbs adrenaline rush, it had an expiration date.
Yep.
And it wasn't necessarily...
The water got squirted out of the bottle, as it were.
But it's like with Dobbs, when they asked him to pass and Justin ended up in the hospital.
Yep.
Well, there was the expiration date.
Yep.
With Jeff... I believe they're at St. Louis in a playoff game.
Yes, that was the Moss squirt the ref with the water bottle game.
It was?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
And okay, well, things are going decently up to half. Then Tony Horn returns the second half opening kickoff. I believe that was the year. Maybe that night in 2000, right? 2000 was the Giants NFC title game. So this was 99.
Yep.
And they got
a shootout.
Well, they got outscored like 38-0 or 38-something in the second half. And then that was it. And then the Jeff George era just came to a screeching halt.
Yeah, because they drafted Dante.
He's one of the most enjoyable, authentic, polarizing people that I think I've been around in all my years, doing either KFAN or calling games for the team, man. That Jeff George just triggers a lot of memories.
Yeah, because by that point, he'd kind of been through it. I mean, he was the number one pick in the draft in 90, I think, and I don't remember. I think people kind of were perplexed of how good he was going to be, and then obviously had gone through the ups and downs of being the guy and then looking like he couldn't be, and obviously the talent is still there. But yeah, by the time he gets here, he's probably seen a lot, lived a lot in the NFL.
Well, you mentioned the name Randall Cunningham, and at 11 o'clock today, I crafted something called Turnaround to 10. It's like teams that, like the Vikings, can they have a turnaround to get to 10 wins or more?
Yep.
'Tis the season, right? But the New York Giants are going to be the focus today. They were 6-11 last year. Can they have a turnaround to 10? The other side of it is the reverse turnaround, where like the Dallas Cowboys, they won 12. Well, they have a turnaround to 10 or fewer. But you mentioned Randall Cunningham, and I'm not going to step on the touchdown call here with the turnaround to 10 bit. I'm just going to share with you this, that the National Football League record for sacks in a season allowed by a team is the 1986 Philadelphia Eagles.
Okay.
Where Randall Cunningham wasn't the starter. That was Super Special Jaws. Randall Cunningham was sacked 72 times that season.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, it's a 16-game season.
It's unbelievable when you look at those numbers. And speaking of numbers, we're doing the old numbers game here in the 9 to noon stable, where we're trying to get to that 53. In all the years that I've done this, and I don't know how it happened, there was one time I think I actually nailed the 53.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Well, because when you make a mistake, you make two mistakes.
Right. Yep. Because you think one guy's in instead of this guy, and then you're,
but you, Andrew, Mark, or whomever will put something out in the Strib. It should be, and probably will be you. And we will see that and hear a lot of things regarding that. And 9 to noon likes to do it too. So when it comes to the numbers game, I'm just going to start here. Like, do you start jotting it down? Do you start penciling it now, preparing for the Sharpie?
Yeah, I mean, you get, okay, here are the locks, and here are the places where this position doesn't have a lot of wiggle room in it. So if there's somebody they like and they're going to try to cram in an extra one, then you got to take one out of somewhere else. Right. Yeah, you have to kind of start
it's fun.
Filling the buckets, and how are they going to go about it is, the best you do with it.
Right.
And, you generally go, I don't know, 40 on or 50, 51, and there's one or two you miss typically.
Okay, so what do you think of this? All right, for the offensive line. And we're talking after the Eagles game. I'm not going to say none of these guys are going to play in the game, because there are a couple of rookies in here, and Ingram's running with the twos in the Cleveland game.
Yep.
So who knows what's next for him? I mean, he's not going to get cut, don't get me wrong.
No.
But, like, who's next for him from a playing time standpoint? So what do you think of this for offensive line? And Nordo, he put together the at the 53 what O'Connell and staff ended up with the only 2 years they've been here. And they've had 25 on defense and offense each year.
Yep.
22 and 23. So in 2022, they finished with 10 offensive linemen.
Okay.
And in 2023, they had 9.
Yep.
In 2024, I'm predicting 9, but I need your help on the last name. I have Darisaw, Brandell, Bradbury, Ingram,
O'Neal,
Quessenberry, Rouse, Juergens, and Reisner.
Okay.
All right. Did Dalton practice yesterday? I wasn't there.
They were kind of pretty light, but no, he didn't.
Was he on the Mike Hughes Memorial Field, or was he like on the side of the real field?
Yeah, he was on the sideline.
Okay.
I didn't see him over in the side.
What do you think of all that?
Well, so the question is, how do you get to 10? Or
no, stay at 9.
Stay at 9, and who would go if? I mean,
I can't get to 10. Can you?
No. That's why I was asking, because I don't really feel like there's an obvious 10th there.
Because it'd be Feeney, and Feeney hasn't really done much, right?
Yeah.
I never see him at the games either.
No.
I don't think he was at the last game, though.
Yeah, I think he was inside. I mean, he was practicing yesterday, but just doing some work afterwards. So I'm doing that. But
Henry Bird was the second guard, 68.
Yeah.
He has some veteran to him.
Yeah.
I don't know about old Henry Bird.
No, I mean, Juergens has struggled.
Yeah.
But
go ahead.
I think they like him as a center, or at least want to develop him there, because you need kind of a succession plan if Bradbury gets too expensive at some point, or you just decide you want to change it up there. So
they don't have a backup center if they don't have Juergens.
That's the problem.
Because Brandell can be the backup center.
Yeah,
and now all of a sudden you're messing with guard.
Yeah. Yeah. So
and I mean, they're, with these all these meetings and these confabs and these backgrounds and everything we have, I mean, it's been uttered before. It doesn't matter from whom, that Michael Juergens will be a starting center in the National Football League.
So you're not cutting him,
right?
In that case, I mean, then you wonder about Reisner a little bit. I mean, I have thought, if you're bringing him in and then especially moving him to right guard to practice there, you want an insurance plan in case you don't like those guards. So, I mean, that one is tricky,
right?
And I've thought he probably makes it, but he would probably be a little. I mean, especially if we're thinking Juergens makes it, Reisner would probably be a little more on an edge.
8
I would
offensive linemen. I mean, then we'd be at 8.
Yeah, that's tough too.
I mean, what you going to do? You're going to put Feeney and Bird and whomever on the practice squad?
No, you're not. I mean, I think 9 makes sense. But if there were a scenario where you said, well, there's something else where they want to keep somebody and you have to make a change, and that's the place where you have to lose one, then that gets you to 8. I think 9 probably makes sense, though.
Well, and that's what I was curious, because it does feel more likely if you had to choose they were going to keep 10 or they were going to keep 8. I think they'd be more likely to make that cut. I don't know what the difference. I mean, Quessenberry, you're not just going to roll with Rouse, right?
No, Quessenberry, I think stays.
Quessenberry's in. But Reisner, is it similar or different than the Robert Tonyan conversation, where if Reisner can't get on the field, right? If Tonyan can't get on the field, then how do you keep him around? Yeah. Is that a similar conversation potentially with Reisner? If he's not practicing and he's not productive, is he potentially taking a spot that solves a wide receiver conversation question?
Right.
Solves a back end of the secondary conversation. Reisner needs, he's proven himself career-wise, but he still needs to get on the field, I think.
Yeah, and the mechanism you could use, I suppose, is he makes the 53, and then you can put players on IR using that short-term return mechanism. You can't do that before the final cutdown, which is why everybody asked, does J.J. McCarthy have a chance to come back? No, because they put him on IR. Too early to use that. If you do it at roster cutdown time, you can bring a guy back from IR during the season. So there could be players that you see make the team, at least for the time being, and then they get moved to IR once that becomes available. So, there could be things like that with either of those guys that they try to use, just knowing that it's not going to be a full season thing, but maybe it's a few weeks and they can get it back.
They are going to have to, for Reisner to be cut, they're going to have to like Henry Bird.
Yep.
More than I or we know.
Right.
And they're also going to have to believe Juergens, who started a lot of games at guard in college.
Can play there in the NFL.
Right. Yep. Because you have to have a backup guard.
Yes.
I mean, somebody who knows how to play the position, and you can slide in there in case somebody gets hurt and, doesn't come back for the game, but will be back next week.
Right.
So I think that's perplexing. 6 wide receivers is what I have. I'm at Jefferson, Addison, Powell, Naylor, Sherfield Sr., and Tristan Jackson. Now, with wide receivers, they kept 5 in 2022, or 5 the last 2 years. I'm on 6. And it's with Jackson. Is he a nondescript special teams guy?
Tristan Jackson?
Yeah.
I mean, he
because
could be.
Naylor, Powell, and Sherfield Sr. are all 3 very important on special teams.
Correct.
So they're all 3 in.
Yeah, Jackson has had such a good camp and such a good preseason. It's hard to see them cutting him.
Right.
And I don't know that he comes in and plays a huge role as a receiver right away, but there's been enough there to like that I would think they're going to have a hard time moving on from him, even if the special teams role, I mean, if you figure that out, and I think they could, I would expect that he's on the team. So, I would agree with those 6.
So I would think they would have 5 active receivers every game.
Yep.
And he would be inactive.
Probably.
He'd be the favorite to be inactive.
Yep.
With Naylor, might be a gunner. With this Najee Thompson weird deal, that the Kene Nwanwu, Jay Ward, and or Jalen Naylor, at least that's what I've seen the most of, but you're at more practices than me. So, those 3, plus they're featuring Speedy Naylor every single game.
Yes.
I mean, he was featured last game. He was featured in the Raiders game.
He started that Raiders game when JJ didn't play.
Right. So, and Addison with the ankle, would you... Let's start with the ankle and then get to the off-field thing after that. Would you guess, or from what you've heard either privately or via press conferences, Addison is available for the Giants game?
I think that's a little bit of a toss-up at this
50-50?
point. Yeah.
Agreed.
I think ankle sprain stuff, it's hard to rush that back, and you don't want it to become a long-term thing.
What about the suspension clip?
Well, the suspension isn't going to be an issue right away, I don't think, because his first court date is not until the day after the Jets game in London, which probably means he has a lawyer appearing for him. I don't think he's getting from London to L.A. in time for that. Regardless of that, I don't think the NFL is going to step in and do anything there until the legal process is played out. And the fact that that doesn't happen until October, or doesn't get started until October, I don't think we're looking at a suspension being an issue right away.
That's Ben Goessling, covers the Vikings for the Star Tribune and StarTribune.com. There's a newsletter the Star Tribune is putting out these days involving the Minnesota Vikings at Ben Goessling via Twitter. It's pinned to the top, so you can start there and figure that out. And when we return, well, what about Jaron Hall and what in the heck got into Tua Tagovailoa? You're listening to KFAN. Ball. About the superfecta of Gilmore, Griffin, Murphy Jr., and Moreau. Fabian's been here 3 weeks. Gilmore 3 days or 3 minutes, so there's that. But you take those four and you have like a combined 441 games of experience. Yep. Where like last year with Blackman and Evans and Byron Murphy Jr., you had like 61.
Yes.
So okay, there is that. But what do you think of the superfecta?
I mean, the first three for sure. Moreau, I guess, is a little bit of a question for me. I mean, do you keep him or do you keep some of your younger guys that may come down to that kind of a choice?
Right. From the Nordo files, we had 6 corners in 22.
Yep.
6 and 6. Yeah.
6 and 6.
6 corners, 6 safeties. And the safeties will be well represented, I think, again. Especially because there have been a lot of them that have played well, and it's
now
hard
you
to
get rid of Lysine, which I mean, it's
that's a whole other
and
conversation.
Is Jay Ward? Does he count against the corners or the safeties?
Well,
but they're all DBs, and they kept 11 of them 10 in 2022.
Yeah, so if you take those 4 and you get to 6, Evans. And then, the question, I guess, would be, is Jay Ward a corner? Are you keeping Deshaun Wright?
I think they keep Fabian Moreau.
Yeah. I mean, I would tend to think as quickly as they put him in with the ones, and he has history with O'Connell, I mean, that makes more sense to me than not.
But they're not cutting a Caleb.
Yeah. I mean, it's then who's your 6? Is it Ward? Is it...
What about the Duke?
Well, it's the Duke. Isn't Deshaun Wright? Is it... trying to think who else is there yet.
Dwight McGlothern's
had a good camp.
Yes.
I mean, that's the one that's tricky. Is do you try to sneak him through because he's looked awfully good.
And you have to be careful when you have joint practices.
Yep.
Because you now know things about the Browns that others don't, but the Browns also know things about you others don't.
Right.
And they may be like, well, you know what? I mean, this rangy guy, undrafted, it's okay. There may have, why'd he go undrafted? Well, that's what people are paid a lot of money to figure out. But that's in the rear view mirror for now, whatever it was. Yeah. Maybe transferring schools, who knows? But he is rangy. He has long arms. He's relatively fast.
Yep.
Had a pick 6 in the in one of the joints, and he jumped the route beautifully. And then we had, the ball granted was thrown right to him in the Cleveland game, and he got a little tired at the end of trying to get into the end zone. But, if you expose McGlothern, I make the Browns favored to pick him up.
Because I've seen it.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, that gets tricky too. So then who comes off of there? Maybe you figure Ward's a safety, and you kind of play the numbers game that way. So if you were...
Well, Jay helps on special teams and could be a gunner.
Yep, that's true.
I don't know about the Duke on special teams at this stage of his career. That's going to hurt him.
Yep, and Jay Ward certainly has proven himself on special teams. So the Duke, I don't know that I would put the Duke on my 53 at this point.
Okay, well, Jaron Hall.
Yep.
I mean, the way I framed it up in the open is... If you're Vikings coaches and decision makers, can you get the penultimate from last year out of your head?
That's the key.
You get him ready, you feel relatively good about it, and then you got to pull him into halftime and use Mullins because the interception to Ballantyne or the strip sack and holding it to he looked like he had no chance.
Yeah, he looked lost.
Which that's a nationally televised game, right?
Yep.
which is an absolute
playoffs on the line.
Right. But it's also a reflection, and you know how these guys think. That's a reflection of me. That's a reflection of like you, and how we got him ready or did not for the game.
Yep.
Whether it's right or wrong, that's how they think.
Yeah, it is. So the question is with him, how many of the issues that reared their heads in that game do they feel like he has improved on enough to be trusted or fixed entirely? That's probably going to be something that only they know. He has looked better, I think, certainly in the preseason. Now, it's not national TV against a playoff team on Sunday Night Football, but I think the question for them is saying, okay, we saw what we saw against the Packers, and you can't unsee that, and we've seen better results in the preseason. Is there a thread there that makes preseason football worthwhile enough to say this is something we can project forward?
Yeah.
I think the answer to that is meetings. It's all the practices in OTAs, minicamp, OTAs especially, that we don't see. Some of that stuff is going to be known only to them, but I have to think if you can get yourself to a point where you say there's tangible signs of progress here, then maybe you can get past that game. Otherwise, I think it's hard to do.
Right.
The thing that may work in their favor there, though, is that everybody else in the league saw that game.
Yeah.
And if that is in the backs of the minds of the general managers that may consider picking Jaron Hall up off waivers, maybe it becomes a little easier to get him through, because you could put him on the practice squad, and the rules now make it so that if you needed him as an emergency QB, you can activate him in that context without having to put him on the 53 on game day or on the active roster. So,
well, if you're Lewis Seen, Duke Shelley, Dalton Reisner, maybe Robert Tonyan,
you're hoping for that,
and N'Keal Harry.
Yep.
He matters.
Yes, he does.
I mean, what they do with him matters here, you know?
Sure does.
And like I said to you in the hallway, I've said it here on the radio a couple of times, let's not forget there was a market for Kellen Mond.
Yep.
Multiple markets.
Yes.
And he was picked up multiple times, including most recently by the New Orleans Saints, who had him for like 3 days in OTAs or mandatory minicamp, then cut him.
Yep.
You know, and then now you got Matt Corral. I mean, here's Matt Corral back in the end zone, having no idea what the play is, taking a safety.
Yeah.
So that all plays into it, too. Ben Goessling, Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. And let's close like this. What do you think, just ride your heart, what do you think got into Tua Tagovailoa with Flores? I mean, goes after him hard.
Yeah.
Years after the Vikings defensive coordinator supposedly and repeatedly hurt the quarterback's feelings.
Yeah, it was interesting because he uses the word terrible person, which is a pretty heavy charge to levy. And you never know what goes on behind the scenes from my seat, obviously, but from what I've seen in covering Brian Flores for a year and a half, there's nothing. I mean, can he be hard? Yes. Terrible person, I think, is an entirely different charge to levy, like I say. So I think my takeaway there is this. There are different approaches to coaching, and Brian Flores certainly has been educated in the Bill Belichick approach. I think there's a generation of players that has not been coached like that and probably figures, well, if you're doing this, that means that you're wrong and I'm right and this shouldn't happen. Well, maybe not. Maybe it means you just disagree and maybe you see things differently. It doesn't mean that somebody's good, somebody's bad. Making those types of value judgments, I think, are hard. One thing I have thought about with this clip, and Brian Flores talks a little bit later today, so we'll see if he has anything he wants to say about it or not. But
wow.
But the thing that has come to my mind is when I talked to him last year, Hotel Lobby, Seattle, he talked a lot about having learned from Kevin O'Connell already about managing relationships with players, coaching tactics that he probably hadn't seen a lot. So I have to think that some of those things is just the interpersonal relationships. Yeah. I think he was admitting, I'm growing, I'm learning as a coach. Some of the things that I need to get better at, I'm picking up from Kevin O'Connell. So I'm curious if he will get into any of that today. I don't expect that he will go there a ton, but it's also, I mean, the other thing that comes up a lot is people can change, people can grow. I think in general, we have a hard time kind of getting to that point with when we make these assessments. If somebody was a certain way in 2019, 2020, they're going to be a certain way in 2024. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah,
so
I would agree with you.
I think leaving room for people to change and grow is part of the discussion here as well.
What's the officiating clip today at noon?
Well, they actually end up moving that to tomorrow now. So they'll bring the officials in because the officials come in to kind of walk players through all of the new stuff. And then they get the officials together with reporters to say, hey, here's all the new stuff so you guys understand it when you're covering it. And a lot of that, I expect, will be kickoff stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think it probably should be.
Bo Richter might require a separate 10-minute meeting off those formation bits, and I still can't figure out what happened.
Yeah. So I think a lot of stuff will probably, and it tends to be like, here are the points of emphasis that the league is talking about, which typically is just like, hey, here are new ways that defensive backs can't grab wide receivers, but this one I expect will be a lot of kickoff stuff, and they leave time for questions too, so it's always informative just to kind of hear from the officials. It's the one time a year you get to do that, so it helps me out quite a bit, and I think other beat writers would say the same.
You, my friend, you are salt of the earth. You're the best, and I look forward to seeing you out there somewhere during the course of the week. And I understand sources tell me that I'll see you Monday at the Great Minnesota Clump together.
That is correct.
What are you doing there for the Strib?
Well, so we're doing a live recording of our Access Vikings podcast. I think that's 11 o'clock. So I'm on with you, and then I'm going straight to there. So you get to be the opening act for the Access Vikings podcast.
Can't wait. We will be your animals, your monkeys.
There you go.
Anytime to the Star Tribune's Beatles.
Appreciate it.
So we'll warm the crowd up for you.
All right.
At Ben Goessling via the X Machine. Follow him as 9 to noon does, and News du Nord is now.
Fan.
Welcome back. It is News du Nord. News du Nord Daily is brought to you by The Casino at Canterbury Park, CanterburyPark.com. For all event details, you still have live racing going on, and you can play poker, blackjack, and table games every day, all year long. So go to CanterburyPark.com. We'll start with the Minnesota Twins. They lose 5-3 yesterday at the San Diego Padres. Zebby Matthews, he's only credited, I think, as a pitcher with 2 runs allowed, but he gave up 5, and I think his own error led to some of those issues. It was Wallner scoring in the first, and Castro added a run to tie it at 2 before a 3-run third took over for the Padres. It was Michael King getting the victory. In former Twins news, I'm pretty sure they have both Donovan Solano. I don't know. I don't think he played yesterday. I think Solano's in San Diego now, if you remember him. But Luis Arraez. Luis Arraez led things off yesterday. He's hitting 300 for the Dads. He was 0 for 2 yesterday. It's going to be Bailey Ober and Perez this evening. And if we're scoreboard/standings watching, the Twins 2.5 back. Cleveland was off yesterday. They are in the Bronx this evening. The Guardians at the Yanks. So we need to beat the Padres. We need them to lose to Aaron Judge and the Yanks, and all will be well. Looking forward to another late start this evening for the Twins at the Padres.
Well, the Zebby trick, second time through, nah. It ain't it. It may be it one day. It's not it right now. And yes, I have watched enough of his first 2 games to say that. Why? Because now we actually are permitted to watch it, no matter where you want to watch it, which is really, really super special. Michael King is a badass, and he was off last night. I mean, my man was way off his game, and they had an opportunity to capitalize, and for the most part did. But when he settled in, now like King. King with the strikeouts and the equity, at least, through this year, he knows how to set things up and get through the lineup a second, maybe a third time. So King, let's see, Yu Darvish is down. King's their best pitcher. And he worked through things and fought through things, and I watched it. It's just, you could tell that human nature gets to win too occasionally, and just wasn't having a great night. But second time through against old Zebby, that kind of played itself out. And the Padres got themselves a nice little thing there. I like their bullpen. Pitching wise, it's that leaves something to be desired. But they can hit. They have some good hitters. And I think the Twins needed that one, quite honestly. And the reason I say it is because they were an inch from sweeping a 4-game series against the Texas Rangers. I mean, an inch. And then all of a sudden, like the Alcala bit freaks out, and they end up losing 6-5. They had to run through their bullpen in certain games and spots in that series, and then they had to travel and play the next day. And that's why I asked you yesterday, wow, the game against the Padres is tomorrow. Wow, they don't even get a day off that emotional loss, but that's cool. So I wouldn't be surprised if they won today. Ober's going about as well as anybody they have. And the Padres are beatable. I mean, the Padres, they're good, but they're beatable. But last night's game had some intrigue to it. And sadly, it did not go the way of the hometown 9.
Well, I think the thing with Zebby that he's going to have to learn and grow from is what allowed him to be promoted, I think, like 4 times over the course of this year, is they kept talking about he throws a ton of strikes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yesterday, they had 18 foul pitches. The Padres offense did, and so it's one thing to throw a lot of strikes. We do need to make them miss, though. He only had 6, I think, swinging strikes yesterday.
Yeah.
And so, as you mentioned, he's going to have to learn a lot, but maybe not ready for the big show quite yet. The Lynx are ready for the big show, though.
Well, just quickly, because baseball fascinates me. The Royals have tied us. All right, we're each 2.5 behind the Guardians.
Who'd they play yesterday?
They beat Seth Lugo, got the victory. Cincinnati, maybe? No, I can't remember. They won a home game.
Angels.
Yeah,
my bad.
L.A. Angels, right. It was at home. And Seth Lugo was masterful in that game. And I caught an interview on MLB Network late last night with Harold Reynolds and Seth Lugo. And Seth, the way Harold framed it up was like when you were at the Mets or somewhere else, is that they were pushing bullpen on you and you always wanted to start. And he agreed. He's like, yeah, you're right. I did. And it might have been the Padres. And he's like, yeah, I wanted to start. And here's why. Because you can do this and we can do this, and you can set this up, and you can frame this up, and you can square this up. And then the next time through, it works. And with the way Witt's playing right now, Salvador Perez is hitting his butt off right now. And with Lugo, Singer coming around a little bit, and then some things injury-wise that have happened here, that was a tough loss Sunday against the Rangers. And those types of losses, when you have a rare 4-game road sweep, all right, against Seager, Garcia, Nathaniel Lowe. I mean, these are dogs, man. And you were an inch from getting that sweep. And then you had to sit there and watch them run by you like you were tied to a post. And then you had to travel and then play a team with which you're not familiar because they play in the other league. That stuff, some people may say it's like champagne problems. All right, whatever. I'm saying it's tough, mentally and physically when you're on the grind like that. So I think these are tenuous times right now for the Minnesota Twins, because I would not be surprised if after this Padres series, if they're in 3rd place.
Wow. And they're talking about Bobby Witt, by the way, like MVP conversation right now.
He's Mike Trout.
Yeah, he's hitting 349.
Yeah, he reminds me of Mike Trout.
Most hits in the MLB right now with 174. He's 5th in RBI. Like, I mean, everything Bobby Witt style is going quite nicely.
Super hot.
To the Lynx, they are in Vegas tomorrow. A couple of dubs against the Mystics. They had that. It was nearly a month long. I think they were off with the Olympic break and such. Nafisa Collier hasn't let anything down. I think 30 points in the most recent victory against Washington. They split 2 with Vegas earlier this year. They won in the 702. They're 3rd in the NBA. Caitlin Clark note, PA, because she just continues kicking ass.
Yeah.
She, let me see here. She passed Tisha Panachero. Tisha, excuse me.
Tisha Panachero.
Mm-hmm. And 232 assists in her rookie year, which was the previous rookie record of 224. She had 9 on Sunday.
Wow.
Panachero, the number 2 overall pick for the Sacramento Monarchs in 1998. No longer in the NBA, of course, but Caitlin Clark is on her way, it feels like, to set every single possible rookie statistical mark in the league's history. And, I think doesn't it feel like the polarization, like the conversation around her, and maybe it is the Olympics and everyone got to chill for a month. Yeah. Kind of, can we just move on and just go, oh, yeah, she's unbelievable and she's great, and we don't have to talk about her and Reese and all these other people.
Well, yeah, we can, because the petulant, petty nature of those against whom she plays seems to have stopped. And why did it stop? Because she whoops your ass.
Yeah.
Okay. And you know what? She also does. She turns the other cheek. She doesn't go after you in press conferences. She doesn't go after you on the court. She's above you. She's a turn the other cheek better than you. She's better than you on the court. She shoots better than you. She passes better than all of you. And she handles tense situations and controversy better than all of you. And you know what? Now that I think about it, and I watched some of the women's Olympics and the basketball games. All right. Well, first and foremost, that whatever that USA team was that she and Angel Reese played on, and they played the Olympic team before they went over, and they beat them.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, let's not just brush that off to the side, like it just happened and it was a prep race for a big stakes race. No, they whooped your ass. Okay, and all of you tried to beat them. Why? Because of Caitlin, and maybe because of Angel Reese. And now that I think about it more, having watched the games, including the spine-tingling victory for the gold, it's ridiculous. Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese were not on that Olympic team. It's utterly ridiculous. It's petty. It also is not seeing the forest for the trees and trying to, and trying to establish something with the veterans and I think her name's Chelsea Gray. Okay, I can name at least 3 players on that team that Clark and Reese are better than, and it's, now that I think about it more, the pettiness that has just gone into this whole thing for the first half of the season. I mean, seriously, it's
and people like you are trying to watch it.
I don't miss a Caitlin game, and I watch the majority of the Lynx games, and I'm going to watch them the rest of the way. But this isn't a.
But that's the funniest part about it, though, is they have a product that individuals that typically have been on the outside are trying to get in and watch.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, no, you don't get it.
Yeah.
Nope, don't come on in here with the Caitlin Clark love. Look what we've had for the last 25 years.
Thank you.
It's super amusing to me. But
okay, well, it's not Caitlin Clark's fault that, with all due respect, 90% of people watching now, including me, didn't watch before.
Right.
It's not her fault. Okay, for whatever the reason, it's, yes, Tisha Penichero and Sue Bird and Lisa Leslie and Rebecca Lobo and Lindsay Whalen and Katie Smith. I mean, I can go on and on and on. Lots of good players. For whatever the reason, they weren't her. And they weren't polarizing in multiple spots, or if they were, people didn't pick up on it. All right, so that's not Caitlin Clark's fault. Secondly, is there's so much of this going on in the WNBA, and I'm gonna draw an NFL comparison, because I've just heard this and seen this with so many players and or coaches over multiple decades. Is when you're above the radar and there's a lot of attention, you're on the radar. There's a lot of attention on you, a lot of high expectations. NFL Network, ESPN, all over this team that's going to be unbelievable. Well, that makes certain coaches uncomfortable. Yet when they're not on the radar and they're flying below it, they're offended.
Yeah.
It's like everybody's sleeping on
Backs
us.
against the wall.
That's
no one looking at us.
Nobody's caring about us.
Disrespect.
Right. It's talking out of both sides of your mouth, which personifies the WNBA. It's
the W.
The narrative to a certain extent was, and I think maybe Clark and or Reese said this, we're cool, and if we get the opportunity to be on the Olympic team the rest of our careers, then we're going to get myriad opportunities to experience this. Well, that's the right thing to say. Plug in Commons excuse computer and just push a different button, and that's what's coming out. Okay, Diana Taurasi, with all due respect, is not in Caitlin Clark's freaking league anymore.
Right.
And you know what? Taurasi talked all that crap during the NCAA title game and early in the WNBA season, and then they met. Well, how'd that go for you? She whooped your ass, and she ran around you. She whooped your butt. She whooped your hindquarters. And
Ava and Stella have heard all of that.
And she ran. Yeah,
from
right.
Mom.
Doesn't mean they've heard her from the surrogate. And she ran all around you.
Yeah.
but you're going to be on the team because it's a heritage selection. And guess what? You almost lost. You almost became the first team since the early 90s representing the United States of America to take an L with the gold on the line. But you can lay back and say we didn't. Yeah, now all of a sudden you got me frustrated because of that petty, petulant crap through which that woman had to go when she's just out there. She's not begging to get this money from, like, people are offering to pay her millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Why? Because she makes them millions of dollars. It's just so stupid, man. All right. 9 to noon continues around the corner. Don't leave.